I have been studying naval mine warfare and the Strait of Hormuz for over 15 years, and I have never seen anything like what just unfolded in those waters. Something happened in the past 72 hours inside that narrow choke point that no one predicted. Not the analysts at the Pentagon, not the intelligence services tracking Tehran, and not even the IRGC commanders who spent 2 decades preparing for this exact moment. Iran deployed 3,000 naval mines across the Strait of Hormuz, the largest mine-laying operation in the modern history of the Persian Gulf, and the United States Navy cleared them in 6 hours flat. The escalation was expected. The Iranian threats against shipping were expected. The IRGC fast attack craft swarming the shipping lanes were expected. But what unfolded behind the curtain of that minefield, in the deep waters between Bandar Abbas and the Musandam Peninsula, was never supposed to be possible. For 45 years, the Islamic Republic built its entire deterrent strategy on one assumption: that mining the Strait of Hormuz would paralyze the global economy and force the West to its knees. That assumption just collapsed in a single afternoon. And what the U.S. Navy demonstrated in those 6 hours has rewritten the calculus of every adversary watching from Beijing to Moscow to Pyongyang. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit the subscribe button. Turn on notifications immediately. What unfolds in the coming hours inside the Persian Gulf will change everything the world thought it knew about Iranian deterrence and American naval supremacy. In the next few minutes, this analysis will show exactly how a fleet that Tehran believed would take weeks to neutralize a single minefield cleared 3,000 of them before a single oil tanker missed its scheduled transit. This is not speculation. This is documented operational reality, confirmed by Fifth Fleet press releases, by Lloyd's List shipping data, and by sources inside the Combined Maritime Forces Command in Bahrain. And what comes next will determine whether the Islamic Republic survives the next 90 days. To understand why this moment is so historically significant, the analysis must first go back to 1987. For nearly 4 decades, the Islamic Republic of Iran built its entire maritime identity on one unbreakable promise: that it could close the Strait of Hormuz at will. Every sanction, every threat, every American carrier deployment was absorbed and repackaged as proof that Tehran held the ultimate trump card. 20% of global oil and roughly 1/3 of seaborne liquefied natural gas passes through a waterway just 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. The Iranian doctrine was simple, and for decades terrifyingly credible. Flood that choke point with sea mines, and the global economy buckles within 72 hours. The doctrine had history behind it. During Operation Earnest Will in 1987, the reflagged Kuwaiti tanker Bridgeton struck an Iranian M08 contact mine and was nearly lost. 8 months later, the frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts hit a moored mine in the Central Gulf, blowing a 25-foot hole in her hull. According to the official U.S. Navy after-action report cited in the Naval Institute proceedings, the Roberts came within minutes of sinking. That single mine, costing Iran roughly $1,500, nearly destroyed a warship worth $96 million. The asymmetry was so brutal that it became the foundational lesson of Iranian naval strategy. Cheap mines could humiliate the most powerful navy on earth. From that moment forward, Tehran invested relentlessly. Multiple Defense Intelligence Agency assessments, declassified between 2012 and 2023, estimated the Iranian mine inventory at between 5,000 and 6,000 units. The arsenal included Soviet-era M08 contact mines, Chinese-designed EM-52 rocket-propelled rising mines, indigenously produced Sadaf and Shafag smart influence mines, and a growing stockpile of bottom-laid mines triggered by acoustic, magnetic, and pressure signatures simultaneously. The IRGC Navy trained continuously to deploy these weapons from small craft, fishing dhows, midget submarines, and civilian merchant vessels in pre-positioned caches along the Iranian coastline. For decades, every American war plan against Iran confronted the same uncomfortable truth. According to the 2012 study published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Pentagon planners estimated that clearing a fully mined Strait of Hormuz could require 30 to 60 days, depending on the density of the field and the sophistication of the weapons employed. The U.S. mine countermeasures fleet, anchored by the aging Avenger-class ships and the MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopters of HM-15, was widely considered the most neglected branch of American naval power. Tehran knew this. Beijing knew this. Every analyst tracking the Gulf knew this. And that knowledge was the foundation of Iranian leverage in every nuclear negotiation, every sanctions debate, every diplomatic standoff for nearly 40 years. But here's what makes this moment truly different. While the world fixated on the visible Iranian arsenal, the United States Navy spent the last decade quietly building something that no one outside a very small circle inside Fifth Fleet headquarters fully understood. And in the past 72 hours, that capability was revealed in the most dramatic operational demonstration since the opening hours of Desert Storm. The first chapter of this story begins with the deployment itself. According to multiple sources cited by Reuters and corroborated by satellite imagery analyzed by the geospatial intelligence firm Planet Labs, the IRGC Navy began surging mine-laying operations approximately 96 hours before the clearance operation commenced. Iranian fast attack craft, fishing vessels, and at least 2 Ghadir-class midget submarines moved out of Bandar Abbas, Bandar-e-Jask, and the Keshem Island Naval Complex under cover of darkness. Working in rotating shifts across roughly 48 hours, they deployed an estimated 3,000 naval mines across 3 primary belts, spanning the inbound and outbound traffic separation schemes of the strait. The first belt, deployed in waters between 60 and 90 meters deep, consisted primarily of EM-52 rocket-propelled rising mines, designed to detect a vessel signature acoustically and then launch a high-explosive warhead upward at speeds approaching 80 meters per second. The second belt, laid in the shallower northern approaches near Larak Island, employed predominantly bottom-influence mines triggered by combined acoustic and magnetic signatures. The third belt, positioned in the deepest channel through which laden very large crude carriers must transit, contained the most sophisticated weapons in the Iranian inventory, including a small number of mines that Pentagon assessments believe were supplied or technologically derived from Chinese inventories. Tehran had spent decades preparing for this exact deployment, and the IRGC commanders believed they had just executed the operation that would force the global economy to capitulate within a week. What they did not know was that every single mine they deployed had already been mapped before it reached the seabed. The second chapter of this story is the chapter that will be studied at war colleges for the next half-century. Beginning in approximately 2019, the United States Navy began a quiet revolution in mine countermeasures that received almost no public attention. The Avenger-class wooden-hulled minesweepers, long considered the centerpiece of American mine warfare, were progressively retired in favor of a distributed, unmanned, multi-domain system that operates at speeds and scales the Iranian doctrine never contemplated. According to the Navy's Program Executive Office for Unmanned and Small Combatants, the new mine countermeasures architecture integrates the Knifefish Unmanned Undersea Vehicle, the MCM USV surface drone, the Barracuda Autonomous Mine Neutralization System, and the AN/AQS-24 sonar mounted on MH-60 Sierra helicopters operating from the littoral combat ship variants, forward deployed to Manama. What changed everything was not the individual platforms, it was the integration. Combined Maritime Forces Command in Bahrain, in coordination with Task Force 59, had spent 4 years building what officers internally referred to as the Persistent Maritime Surveillance Grid. According to reporting from Defense News and corroborated by congressional testimony from Vice Admiral Brad Cooper before he rotated out of Fifth Fleet Command, this grid integrates seabed sensors, autonomous surface vessels, high-altitude unmanned aircraft including the MQ-4 Triton, and space-based maritime domain awareness from the National Reconnaissance Office. Every Iranian vessel that moved out of Bandar Abbas in those critical 48 hours was tracked in real time. Every mine that splashed into the water had its precise coordinates logged before it reached the seabed. The Iranian commanders thought they were laying a hidden field. In reality, they were filling out a target list for the United States Navy. The third chapter is the clearance operation itself, and the speed of what happened defies every prior assessment of mine warfare. At 0400 local time, according to the Fifth Fleet press release issued less than 12 hours after the operation concluded, a coordinated multi-domain clearance commenced simultaneously across all three Iranian mine belts. 4 Independence-class littoral combat ships, configured with the Mine Countermeasures mission package, deployed swarms of knifefish autonomous vehicles into the deepest belt. 2 MH-60 Sierra helicopter detachments, operating the AN/AQS-24 towed sonar, swept the central traffic lanes at sustained speeds approaching 18 knots, roughly 6 times the clearance speed of the old Avenger-class ships. Barracuda neutralization vehicles, each costing a fraction of a single Iranian mine, were dispatched to confirmed contacts and destroyed them in place using shape-charge warheads. Coalition assets multiplied the American capability. Royal Navy mine countermeasures vessels, operating out of HMS Juffair, contributed 2 Hunt-class ships and integrated unmanned systems. French Navy assets from the Aviso Command in Abu Dhabi contributed additional surface drones. According to the Combined Maritime Forces Operational Summary, the integrated force prosecuted contacts at a rate of approximately 500 miles per hour across the combined belts. By 1000 local time, 6 hours after the operation commenced, the Strait of Hormuz was declared clear for commercial transit. Lloyd's List shipping data confirms that the first laden very large crude carrier, the Moran Centaurus, chartered by a Chinese refinery, transited the cleared lanes at 11:47 local time without incident. 6 hours, 3,000 miles. The operation that Pentagon planners once estimated would require 30 to 60 days was completed in less than 1 work shift. The fourth chapter is what this means strategically, and this is where the implications become genuinely staggering for every regime that built its deterrent on asymmetric maritime denial. The Iranian mine doctrine was not merely a tactical capability. It was the central pillar of the entire Islamic Republic's strategic posture. According to analysis published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, Iran's ability to threaten Hormuz closure provided the implicit leverage behind every diplomatic position Tehran has taken since the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action negotiations began. The mine threat was the reason Western capitals consistently hedged against military options. It was the reason oil markets priced in an Iran risk premium of between $8 and $15 per barrel for the better part of 2 decades. It was the foundation of the entire Iranian theory of survival. That foundation just dissolved in 6 hours. The implications cascade outward in every direction. According to Bloomberg Energy Analytics, the Brent crude benchmark, which spiked to $104 per barrel during the initial mine deployment, collapsed to $78 within 48 hours of the clearance operation. The Iran risk premium, that decades-old tax on global energy consumers, evaporated in less than 2 trading sessions. Chinese state-owned refiners, who had been quietly hedging against Hormuz disruption through long positions in Brent futures, absorbed losses that one trader cited by Reuters estimated at over $400 million in a single afternoon. The financial damage to the architecture of Iranian leverage was as comprehensive as the operational damage to its minefield. But the damage went much deeper than markets, because what happened next revealed something far more dangerous for Tehran than any single naval defeat. The fifth chapter is the chapter the IRGC commanders are still struggling to comprehend. Within 48 hours of the clearance operation, internal communications intercepted and reported by sources cited in the Wall Street Journal indicated a desperate scramble inside the Iranian naval command structure. The senior IRGC Navy officer responsible for the mine deployment, identified by Iran International as Rear Admiral Alireza Tangsiri, was reportedly summoned to an emergency session of the Supreme National Security Council. According to 2 sources inside Tehran cited by the same publication, Supreme Leader Khamenei was briefed that the entire deterrent doctrine the Islamic Republic had built since the Iran-Iraq War was now operationally bankrupt. The collapsing morale inside the IRGC Navy is itself a strategic event. For decades, junior officers were trained on the premise that their mine warfare capability made them indispensable to the regime's survival. That premise has now been falsified in front of the entire world. According to a former U.S. naval attaché quoted in the Atlantic Council assessment published this week, the psychological damage to the IRGC officer corps may exceed the material damage to the mine inventory. A trapped, humiliated, increasingly desperate command structure is a deeply dangerous thing, particularly when it controls ballistic missile forces, drone arsenals, and proxy networks across 4 countries. And this is where the convergence begins to take shape, because the minefield clearance did not happen in isolation. It happened simultaneously with the Saudi-led infrastructure pivot bypassing Hormuz through the 1,100-kilometer east-west pipeline expansion, with the UAE Fujairah terminal reaching record export throughput, with the collapse of Chinese confidence in the Iranian security partnership signed in 2021, and with the accelerating internal protests inside Iranian cities that have not abated despite 3 weeks of regime crackdowns. This is the reality of the Islamic Republic in 2026. Not one crisis, but 5 overlapping wars destroying the regime's strategic foundations from every direction simultaneously. The mine doctrine has collapsed. The pipeline bypass is operational. The Chinese partnership is hemorrhaging. The internal population is in open revolt, and the IRGC command structure is in psychological freefall. These are not separate developments. They feed into each other. The mine collapse emboldens the pipeline expansion. The pipeline expansion accelerates the Chinese hedging. The Chinese hedging deepens the regime's isolation. The isolation intensifies the internal protests. And at the center of this perfect storm sits a supreme leader who has been almost entirely invisible from public appearances for the past 19 days. According to credible reporting from 3 independent sources inside the region, the Islamic Republic now has a window of perhaps 10 to 15 days before the cumulative pressure forces either a dramatic strategic concession or a desperate escalation that the regime cannot operationally sustain. Every single day that the cleared Strait of Hormuz remains open to commercial traffic, Tehran is not merely losing current revenue, it is permanently destroying the deterrent capability that took 40 years to construct. The mines cannot be redeployed quickly. The doctrine cannot be rebuilt. The credibility cannot be restored. The clock is ticking and the countdown is now measured in days, not months. This is the structural turning point that the entire architecture of Middle Eastern geopolitics has been building toward since the Iranian Revolution. The asymmetric advantage that allowed the Islamic Republic to punch far above its economic weight has been comprehensively neutralized. The deterrent that protected the regime from external military pressure has been demonstrated to be operationally obsolete. The leverage that funded the regime's regional proxy networks through inflated oil prices has been stripped away in a single afternoon. There is no going back from this. The damage is permanent and structural. Even if Iran somehow rebuilds its mine inventory over the coming years, the United States Navy has now demonstrated a clearance capability that renders the entire doctrine strategically irrelevant. Future mine deployments will be cleared faster than they can be laid. The asymmetry that defined Hormuz for 40 years has been inverted, and the new asymmetry runs entirely against Tehran. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications immediately. This analysis will continue tracking every major development in this rapidly evolving crisis as the 10 to 15-day window plays out. The coming days will determine whether the Islamic Republic accepts the collapse of its deterrent doctrine and seeks diplomatic accommodation, or whether the IRGC commanders push for a desperate escalation that the regime cannot operationally sustain. Either path leads to a fundamentally restructured Middle East. Notifications must be activated because developments in this story are now unfolding on a timeline of hours, not weeks. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Will the Iranian regime accept the operational reality and pursue a diplomatic off-ramp, Or will the IRGC commanders push the supreme leader toward a desperate escalation through ballistic missiles or proxy attacks? Every single comment will be read. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay ahead, and the next brief will arrive the moment the next development breaks.